we are all live on Facebook for the Tuesday edition of the Not Your Average Investor Show. Today, we're talking about how to buy rental properties in a different country. I'm your host, Pablo Gonzalez. With me, as always, the man that I like to call GC because he's got genius concepts, because he knows how to generate cash flow, because he's a great co-host, and because his name is Greg Cohen. Say hello, Greg.
Hey, everybody. Great to be with you.
And the star of the show today has been creating people-centered, vibrant communities in Central and South America for over 20 years. She is with ECI Development. She's a globetrotter that has a dream life. It's kind of like I feel like her life is my Instagram account or something like that. Looks amazing. Going to give you the best advice that she's got on how to own rental properties in different countries. Today we got Rachel Jensen. Welcome to the show, Rachel. We're excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I know that I'm guessing that the folks who are listening are interested in properties overseas or just learning more about international opportunities. And I'm here to tell you, go through all that with you, tell you it's not that scary of a process. It's not that daunting. It can be quite simple, straightforward. I'll give you some great tips throughout the show, great questions to ask as you're looking at properties overseas to help make that easier and more comfortable for you.
What a pro, Rachel. I love the intro, man. Coming prepared. It's always obvious that it is easier to do just about anything when you got the right people around you. And today we got you, we got GC, we got our community. We like to say that if you want to find out about owning rental properties in your portfolio or property management for rental property owners or an edge on the Jacksonville market, you're in the right place, even though we're going to talk about international properties today. If you want some one-on-one advice right now, go to chatwithjwb.com. And right now it's when we welcome that community. It's time for our favorite part. It's the roll call. You ready for the roll call, Rachel?
Yes.
All right, here we go. Nadeem Shah. Hi, everybody. We got Drew Barnhill from Marietta, Georgia. Good afternoon, everyone. We got Madison, our marketing teammate in the house. She's welcoming everyone to the show. We got John Henning. Good afternoon, all. We got Joanna, our community manager. If you need anything, drop it in the chat. Joanna will be happy to help you out. We got Michael Kubata. He's back in the house. Welcome, Michael. We got Everett Shapiro. Pop, pop. He says hello, all. We got Carl Thompson. Good morning, everybody. We got our regular Rosalind Riley coming from Marietta, California. Welcome back, Rosalind. We got Noah Randari. Greetings from California. Good morning to you, Noah. Who else we got here in the house? We got Greg Stone, who says it's about 20 degrees here in New Jersey. All right, Greg. Well, you know, it's kind of like 70 degrees in Belize. That's how cold it is over there. We got Lee Bishop, the MVP of the Not Your Average Investor Show community. He says, hello, gentlemen. And Rachel, nice to see you here. We got Anthony Ditta from South Florida. Hello, friends. Anybody else scrolling through? Sergio Prieto, he's back. Go Gators. Sergio, what's up? Good to have you. Raj Bantu. Hello, everyone. Roger Voisenet. He is a JWB referral celebrity. He says hello from sunny Virginia. And Marilyn Cotterman from Homosassa, Florida.
Home of the manatees.
Home of the manatees. Good to have you back, Marilyn. And we got Wesley Fine, who's here from Germany. I love the international audience. We got an international guest. Welcome, Wesley. I don't know. Wesley, have you been on the show before? I think you might be new, or it might be the COVID I got going on in the brain. I don't know. Let us know in the chat. Do you recognize him, Greg?
I do not. Right. But I don't want to make that mistake again. I made that mistake one time for Rosalind and I'm scarred. So hopefully Wesley is new.
Never again. He does say he's new. Wesley, I hope that you find a place here in our Not Your Average Investor Show community. Like I said, I'm recovering from COVID. That's why my voice is messed up. I'm probably going to have some brain fog. So having great guests and great questions from the audience is what's really going to drive the show as usual today. So make sure that you're using that chat box. Make sure you're using the Q&A and be a part of the show. Before right now, let's get into it with Rachel. Rachel, what is the opportunity exactly when it comes to owning properties abroad? Like, why would somebody want to own a property abroad versus in the United States?
Sure. Well, first I'm going to say, I see a couple of names on here that I recognize, Roger and Nadeem. So I just want to say hi to you guys. I saw your name in the chat there, but nice to see everyone coming together. It really does tend to be a small community of people who are looking at property overseas and all connecting. So nice to see you guys. Nice to meet everybody. Well, going back to your question there, Pablo, is why are people looking at property overseas? There's been a variety of reasons. Some people are simply looking at it from the lifestyle perspective. They're saying, I've had enough in my home country. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I want to go relax on the beach somewhere. I want to open a little cute beach bar or just simply relax. And so we're seeing people who are looking at it from that lifestyle perspective and relocating. right? They might be selling everything they have in their home country and then coming down to a new country. Maybe their dollar stretches further, maybe it's quality of life, a handful of reasons there. We see people who are buying property from an investment perspective also. So they're looking to diversify. We've all heard the saying, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. And so they're looking to just get outside of that realm. Now, it's great if you're familiar with the market, you know a market, but you also want to look at other places as well, see where it is that you can diversify. And then we have the people who are looking for a little bit of both. They're looking to own a property now, put it in the rental market, earn some rental income from it. We know real estate prices just continue to climb, so they'll get in it now while the real estate's more affordable than it will be in 5 years from now, earn rental income from it. And then in 5, 6, 10 years, however many years, when they're ready to retire, they'll come down and spend time here and relocate. So I have to say, being in the international real estate space, especially over the last couple of years with COVID, I truly thought in March 2020, I saw someone just said they were here in March 2020, but March 2020, when they shut down borders, people weren't traveling. I was like, I'm going to not have a job. I'm going to be out of business. Who's going to be coming down or who's going to be buying real estate overseas when they can't come down to the properties and check them out? And I have to say the last 2 years have been our busiest years in business over the last 25 years that ECI has been in business, because what a lot of people realize is they had time to research a little bit more. They were stuck in their house. They're seeing pictures of the tropics and like, that's where I want to be. That's where I'm going to be after all of the shenanigans end. And so it's been really quite neat to see the different perspectives, to see why people are moving down or buying property here. And Belize is where I'm based, but do work all throughout the region. So they've all been pretty popular. A lot of the countries have been popular for their own reasons, but I'm sure we'll get into that in a bit.
Yeah, absolutely, Rachel. And, and first of all, thank you for being on the show. Rachel, for everybody who knows Keith Weinhold and the Get Rich Education podcast, that's how I got to know Rachel. She came so highly recommended. I know Keith has invested with her. And he just said Rachel is the go-to for international investing. And international investing for me is kind of scary. I've never done it, never thought about it. And I'm sure that most of the folks in the audience are kind of in the same boat, Rachel. So could you just kind of start from the very beginning and just maybe, take yourself out of the equation and maybe put yourself in the shoes of a brand new investor, maybe invested in the States, maybe not. What are some of the questions you should be asking? What are some like the bare minimum that you should know before getting into an international investment?
Sure. And, I was most certainly in that position because I was personally looking at real estate overseas a while ago. I was lucky enough to be working with a development company, but at first when I was starting to explore options personally, because I, like many people on here, am a real estate investor. I do have rental properties in the States throughout Latin America, but it is very different. My process from buying real estate in the States was very different than buying real estate here in Belize or in other countries. And so there are some key questions that I would recommend people ask when they're starting that exploration process. And what I'm going to recommend, I don't know how you all take notes. Some people do it on their phones. Some actually have a pen and paper, is write these questions down because they are going to come in handy as you're starting to explore property overseas. One of the first questions that I would always recommend asking is, who is the developer or who is the seller, right? That is one of the biggest components that you have to know, because we live and we're working in a world that really is, in a sense, the wild, wild west. We don't have all those regulations that you have in the States or Canada or many developed countries. And not to say that, that's a bad thing, it's just a different thing. So you have to put more emphasis on doing your due diligence. So understanding who the developer is, how long have they been in business? Have they built anything else in this country, on the island, in the region? Understanding that too, because so many times, and I've seen this, as we have these hobby developers who are coming down, and I've met a handful of them. They come to Belize, they're here because they love diving. And then all of a sudden they say, oh, real estate seems easy. I did it in the States, or, I can figure it out when you're here, but it's very relationship based here. And so if you're coming in without knowing anyone, without really doing your homework, then you may not be setting yourself up for success. So as a buyer, I would recommend always asking that question, is who is the developer if you're buying from a development? And then in addition to that, if it's just a seller, if it's a resale, it's understanding as much about the property as possible, which kind of segues into the second question there, is the property titled? Is the property titled? So will you, as the foreign buyer, get title to your property? And so if you don't know the seller, maybe you'll find out that the seller never actually had title to their property. So you want to make sure that you're doing that due diligence, asking to see the title to make sure that it is titled in the name of the person who is selling. In Latin America, we have something called right of possession. So right of possession means that you own it because your family maybe has been living there for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, but you don't actually have title to it. You don't have deed to it. Now, the people who are living there who have right of possession can eventually get title. They have to go through the process. And then from there, you can transfer title from them to you, which is what we as a development company have done in a couple cases. But you have to go in understanding that process and really just understanding if you're going to be the one who's getting title. And then each country is different in many ways. But Mexico, for example, you as a foreigner are not allowed to get title to property that's within a certain distance from the coast. Now, what you get is a lease. It's a 99-year lease. It's called fideicomiso. It's a bank trust, essentially. And there are a lot of people who feel comfortable with that setup, but there are many people who don't. But if you're going to Mexico for the first time, you're going to Playa del Carmen or Cancun or Tulum, and you love it, and you're finding great deals just blocks from the beach with these beautiful Caribbean views or Bay views, then you find, all right, $350,000, I can afford that. I can make that happen. Then you find out that you're not actually getting title to it. It's just a lease. And after 99 years, you're not passing that down for generations. You're passing it down for a couple of generations. Then that lease expires. So understanding what your primary goal is having that title important to you. And then the third point I'm going to mention here, and then of course we can expand on any of this, is the financing aspect of it. So it's really important for people and foreigners specifically to understand that the financing they're going to find for properties overseas is probably not going to be as attractive as financing that you're able to get in your home country. In the States, I was reading an article, I think it said interest has gone up to like 3-point-something%. It's like the highest that it's been since COVID. And I'm sitting over here thinking, wow, if we had that sort of interest rate in Latin America, we'd have people be lining up the doors to get loans. Instead, our interest rates are typically 10, 11, 12%. Banks will typically only put 50% in. They want to see that you're putting the other 50% in, less risk for them. But at the end of the day, just also depending on who you're buying from, some developers have great financing, some resellers or sellers of resale homes will offer seller financing, but just go in with that understanding that you probably won't be able to find as attractive as loan options as you can in the States.
I love that little dose of reality of like what financing is really like in the States versus the rest of the world. We in the United States are, with good reason, talking about interest rates going up right now. But the fact that we have loans in place that are 30-year loans where you can put 20% down or 25% down with these incredibly low rates, even though they've gone up a little bit, historically low right now, is such a huge advantage of one of the main reasons why I love investing in the States specifically. And I'm just curious, you mentioned the developer and the title and the financing. Those are just great questions to focus on. Just maybe a dumb question. Is there such thing as title insurance in Belize or in any of these other countries?
There used to be. So, I mean, for us, from the development perspective, we've had a couple of our properties have title insurance, but then those title companies pulled out. We had First American, we had Stewart. Those companies ended up pulling out of the country just because they are higher risk. But you do have access to the lands registry and to see who actually is on the title. Now, I really don't think in many of the countries we're in, there's risk of somebody coming in 40, 50, 60 years later and saying that's my land. If you have title, if it's in your name, then you're pretty set. Now, it's not a guarantee, obviously, but you're pretty set there. But no, there's no title insurance here, but there is title. So that's a big benefit.
Just completely different. It seems like a similar way of doing things, but at the same time, some of the main staples that we just count on here are completely different. More reasons why you need to be working with a team and an expert that you trust when you're going into something that is very well, as you described, a little bit like the Wild Wild West if you don't know what you're doing, right?
It is. And then for those of you who watched the teaser for our session today, one of the topics that I mentioned on there was the titling. So just going in with this understanding that titling is going to take time regardless of where in Central America you're buying. Nicaragua is one of the countries we're in. It's actually one of the fastest countries to deliver title. It takes about 4 or 6 months. But Panama, for example, it's which is actually kind of surprising because Panama is one of the most developed countries within Central America, but it takes 18, 24 months for title to be delivered to you. Now there are securities that you have along the way. Your countersigned paperwork is registered with the lands department. So there's that security there, but for you to actually get that piece of paper with the deed that says you're the owner, it takes a little bit of time. So just understanding that and going with the right expectations is important.
Rachel, I got so many questions, right? Because I'm somebody that in I told you I went on this trip to like San Juan del Sur in like 2011. And then I spent the majority of 2012 thinking about buying like a bed and breakfast on like the coast of Nicaragua. Right. So this is totally lighting up my sensors. And I know that our community has some great questions, and I want you to keep them coming, because we're going to go into Q&A right around 1:00. We're going to go into Q&A for 15 minutes, and then we're going to get into the scorecard. As you're talking about this stuff, a couple of things that I want to peel back on. Number one, you're talking mostly about Central America and the Caribbean. Can you just kind of describe what countries you actually are in, and the difference in kind of like Latin American countries versus Asia or whatever, right? Like kind of what are the benefits of staying in this side of the hemisphere?
Sure. So we're in Belize, which is where I'm physically based year round. And Belize, a lot of people either don't know where it is or haven't heard of it. It's formerly known as British Honduras. It's a small country about the size of Massachusetts, smallest population in this part of Central America, about 400,000 people. And Belize is what I like to consider the stepping stone for people who are looking at property overseas, because it's British common law. So that's very familiar to a lot of people. Also, this surprises folks because it is based in Central America, but English is the official language here. You'll hear Spanish, you'll hear Creole, but all of the paperwork, all transactions, meeting with the attorneys, all of that is done in English, which gives us a level of comfort. And then also it's quite easy to get to from North America. There are continuously new flights, direct flights being added regularly. One of the new flights that just started coming in is Alaska Airlines for those of you on the West Coast. Now there are directs coming in for the West Coast. So it's just a little bit easier to get here. And we will continue to see that. I also think that Belize is really at what I call the sweet spot of the real estate investment curve. And we'll go through that later if we have time, or I'll send you all a copy of that chart that we have. But it's really at the sweet spot of the investment curve where prices haven't plateaued, but at the same time, there's still rental income that's coming in because it's a very popular tourism spot for, like we were saying before, diving and fishing and snorkeling. Next country that we're in is El Salvador. And, we as developers, we've been around for about 25 years. We weren't actually looking at El Salvador until fairly recently, when the President Bukele announced Bitcoin as legal tender in the country. We've been accepting cryptocurrency and Bitcoin for the last 5-6 years. So for us, it was a no-brainer, because as a developer, what we do is we build communities. And we have this really strong base of crypto folks who are looking at the crypto community and wanting to use their crypto. So we want to build a community for them. It's a beautiful spot overlooking El Zonte, which is one of the best surf locations within El Salvador. So it's a five minutes down to the beach, and it's on a hill. So from all of the locations within the property, you have incredible views looking over the Pacific. In addition, we're in Nicaragua. Nicaragua scares people sometimes, I think, just because there's a history of the country. But I do have to say that has been our most popular development over the last few years. We have about 100 homes under construction right now. And appreciation, I know you said, Pablo, you were there a little over 10 years ago. I don't want to make you feel a little bad here, but that would have been such a good time to buy. We've seen just from being in business there since the early 2000s that property has appreciated exponentially, especially over the last couple of years. But where we're located, it's about 2,500 acres, located on the Pacific waters, golf course, incredible surf there, closest beachfront community to Managua, which is the capital. So Nicaragua really tends to attract more of the adventure travelers, people who enjoy surfing, want to be on those empty waves, and also people that maybe they want to learn some Spanish while they're living in a new location. In addition to that, we're in Honduras. So for those of you who are divers, you probably heard of Roatan and Utila, the Bay Islands. We're located just across the water there on the mainland in an area called La Ceiba. And it probably is one of my favorite geographies that we have as an organization. It's there on the Caribbean. It's a long stretch of beach. So you have about 2 miles, a little bit less than 2 miles of beach. And then you have the Dole pineapple plantation behind you. So it probably smells delicious year round. And then behind that, you have the mountains. And then last but not least is Panama. And Panama, I think, is one of the places where if you're not looking at Belize, Panama is the next stepping stone for people who are just starting to look at property overseas, because it is more developed than other countries within the region. They have the Panama Canal. So every time a boat goes through that Panama Canal, that's money coming into the country for there to be improved infrastructure. So you have great hospitals, you have great healthcare, so many direct flights coming in, and that property is more of a tropical highlands, cooler climate. Mid 60s during the night, mid 70s during the day, but tropical highlands sort of community.
Yeah, that's a great overview of the beautiful upside of Central America has such treasures, and it's such wonderful, wonderful nature. As you're telling me all this, right? Kind of what stopped me, right? it's a couple of things that I would imagine that people that are looking to invest overseas think about. For me, in Nicaragua was a political turmoil, right?
Yep.
Like you mentioned El Salvador and Honduras. To me, as a South American, I'm like, those are dangerous places, right? Like
Yep.
you mentioned Belize. To me, Belize is kind of like magical, right? Like that, I could see why that is the entry point. And then Panama also kind of has that same
Yep.
feeling of like an international community when it comes to, when it comes to these beliefs of like political turmoil in Nicaragua or safety, when you hear about stuff in El Salvador and Hondurans, what are people missing about that? Do people feel that when you're investing and living down there?
So some people, that's the reason why some people don't invest. But I have to tell you, the people who do invest are people who typically go down there, check it out for themselves, and see that. I mean, yes, there is dangerous areas within the country, within the cities. A lot of it is within certain areas. It's localized. Crime tends to be localized in countries like Nicaragua, El Salvador. You do tend to see it's more of drug gangs and drug violence. And so once you get outside of those areas where it's considered dangerous or where there's high crime, you're welcomed, right? People are so warm and welcoming and want you to be there. And I know that's one of the big reasons why people are investing in these countries, is because of the locals, because they feel they're welcome there. They want them to be there. And so there definitely is the stigma about the countries, negative stigma about the countries. But when people actually go down and see it for themselves, like, oh, nobody tried to kidnap me. Maybe there's some petty crime where people will try to pull money out of your wallet. But, the three of us were talking about Spain before and how we studied abroad in Spain. And the one thing we had these classes, I don't know if you had them, but we had these classes that where you're living in this other country, here are things that you need to do to not stick out or to be careful or to be safe. And the one thing that popped up when we were there in Sevilla, Spain, was watch your bags, because people are going to pickpocket you. And I'm like, you know what, if that's the worst that happens, I'm okay. And it's the same in many parts of the world here. But I spent a lot of time in New Orleans, and in New Orleans, you go one block in the wrong direction and you're in the most dangerous part of the city. And so, you could be looking at beautiful houses, multi-million-dollar homes, go one block off of St. Charles, and all of a sudden you're in a dangerous area. So I do think it tends to be very similar. But what happens is we hear the news and they categorize areas as entire countries. And so now, instead of just thinking, all right, it's this area in San Salvador, this one town or one neighborhood in San Salvador that's unsafe, we're thinking the entire country is unsafe. So I think that there's also opportunities there for there to be appreciation. Some people are looking at this from the cash flow perspective. Others are looking at appreciation. A lot of us want the best of both worlds. But Nicaragua, for example, it was a place that people thought dangerous. I know when I moved down there in 2012, the first thing my mom said is, let me know the moment you get to your home, because I am nervous you're going to get kidnapped. She ended up coming down a couple years later and saw that it was she says one of the best vacations of her life. But a lot of times people just, listen to the news and categorize the country as the entire place, when really it's not quite like that. But Nicaragua, we've seen a tremendous amount of growth, tremendous amount of appreciation. 4 or 5 years ago, we had homes starting at $119,000. Today, those homes are $179,000, $189,000. So a ton of room for appreciation in countries like El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua.
I'd really love to explore that topic a little bit more. When I'm thinking about different cash flow markets in the States, there are those markets that are in the Midwest that have higher cash flow numbers, but don't have as much population growth and don't have as much potential appreciation or even historical appreciation. And then we think of Jacksonville as that best of both worlds, where you get positive cash flow, but you have huge population growth and huge appreciation potential. Could you kind of talk to us about the different markets that you have and maybe fit those into those boxes there? Which is the cash flow play? Which is the appreciation play? Which is the middle of the road?
Yes, and we have something called the real estate investment curve. And on this curve, there are countries at the bottom part that are in areas that are in higher levels of appreciation. When you get to the top part of the curve, you have countries that are cash flowing well. So at the top part of the curve, you have Costa Rica, right? Costa Rica, it's been around in the tourism market for the last 30, 35 years. Everyone knows it's a safe place to be, and it's cash flowing because it's had this publicity, right? It's had its PR over the last few decades. But people who are buying real estate there are finding that it's really expensive because it has been in a mature market for a while. You go to the bottom part of the curve, you have the El Salvador, the Honduras, Nicaragua is even a little bit further up at this point, where there's more opportunities for appreciation. And so I really do see Belize really has the best of both worlds. And what you can even do when you look at each country, of course, is thin slice it. Like, we can't look at the United States and say, all right, United States is great for cash flow, or it's great for appreciation, because there's so many different markets. It's the same in each of the countries that you go to. So I'm speaking very generally here when I say that Belize is at the best spot on the curve there when you have the best of both worlds. But I've been here for about 10 years and I've seen the market just increase, and real estate prices truly for what they could be have a beachfront condo on a Caribbean island is just a fraction when you're comparing it to other Caribbean islands like Bahamas or Aruba. And so you see the country developing, you see the country growing, and to see that it's getting to the point where it's growing, it's becoming more popular, people are coming for vacations, they're continuing to come back. I think that it really is at that sweet spot of the curve there. And then something else to analyze too, as you're looking into new markets, is who's already in the space. And what I mean by that is branded hotels, right? Branded hotels do a ton of homework before they go into a new market. They are looking at the occupancy, they're looking at the competition, they're looking to see the viability of bringing their brand to this location. And so about 5 or 6 years ago, we started working with a hotel brand. And at this point now we have contracts with 2 hotel brands to be coming in. One's a Marriott, one's a Best Western. So 2 very, very different industries, 2 very different markets, really. A Marriott 4.5 star and a Best Western 3.5 star. 2 very different markets, but both brands saw the potential to be here on Ambergris Caye. The brands are coming to Ambergris Caye versus the rest of the country, which I think speaks volumes, especially for investors. But I think that's one of the biggest indicators. See how many hotel brands there are already there, see how many more are coming, and you're able to see if you're getting into the market at a lucrative time if you're looking for appreciation there. But I would say that Belize is really at that sweet spot right now. And then the other one I've seen is Nicaragua, more so from the appreciation perspective. But we've seen people coming in and they just, they like the lifestyle down there. It's one of the most affordable countries in the region. People can live very, very well for a fraction of what they're living in their home country. And so they're coming down from that regard, or they just want to serve the adventure travelers who are coming down. I know where we are specifically, it's the closest beachfront hotel to Managua. We have 2 of the best surf breaks within Latin America. And so we have a very specific audience who's coming, but that I think is the best opportunity from the appreciation perspective.
Really cool. Could we spend a little bit of time just talking about purchase prices and like appreciation rates? I think it would be cool to know because, and let's talk about Belize because it seems to be kind of the middle of the road, and we can kind of compare, that like to Jacksonville, right? Our median home sales price in Jacksonville is just newly updated. It's $325,000, right? And then over the last year, we had 15 to 20% home price appreciation, which is huge, the biggest in Jacksonville's history. Right? Our normal home price appreciation is about 4.6% per year. So let's talk about Belize. What are home prices and what happened last year for appreciation? What's more normal?
Sure. So prices here have just skyrocketed, truly just skyrocketed. And so I'll give you examples from the communities where that's the one I'm most familiar with. So we have branded hotel product Best Western starting at about $130,000, going up to Marriott beachfront luxury starting at about $400,000, and then working up from there. You get to the penthouse here at 1.5 mil. The top floor 3-bedroom penthouse here at 1.5 mil. So there's a large variety there. But historically on the island, and I'd say historically over the last 20 years, typically it's about a 5% appreciation per year. Over the last year, I'd say it was between 12 to 15%, maybe even a little bit higher than that. We're just seeing people want to come down and park their money somewhere. Belize is a safe spot. Belize is where we're seeing a lot of vacationers come down, but it has certainly been increasing. And I think as more people start to discover the country, right? Because a lot of people, I don't know, I'm just curious, is that anybody, and you don't have to admit this if you don't want to, but if you had no idea where Belize was before we started this conversation, if you want to disclose that in the chat, you're more than welcome to, but I'm going to guess there were some people on here who had no idea where Belize was. And so you didn't know, there you go.
I'll make it acceptable for everybody. I didn't know before we started talking, Rachel. I looked it up.
Well, and a lot of people don't know because it's been overshadowed by Mexico. And for those of you who don't know, Cancun, Mexico is just 200 miles north of where I'm currently located. So we're surrounded by Guatemala and Mexico. Those are the countries that we border. But a lot of people have heard of Mexico. A lot of people go to Costa Rica. And then there's this little islet or this little country right there wedged in between Guatemala and Mexico where they speak English. It's on the Caribbean. It has some of the best diving and fishing and snorkeling in the world. And so now more and more people are starting to discover it. And I'm sure, Greg, I don't know the name of this phenomenon, but now you're going to start to see Belize pop up everywhere, right? You're familiar with it. Now you're going to start to see it pop up everywhere. But it's been incredible to see the growth. And as I've been here over the years, we've seen infrastructure improve. And I remember 2012 was my first visit here. And we had, this is before WhatsApp, and internet was horrible. I mean, brownouts and blackouts happened all the time. And I was here, I'd, go to the restaurants, go to the bars, meet up with some of the locals here. And I was probably the only 21-year-old there. I'm like, yeah, I'm working here. It's great. It's fun. But what happened is just all retirees who are here because they wanted just a slower pace of life. Now, fast forward 10 years, internet is phenomenal. We were the first spot in the country that had fiber optics. In addition to that, roads are getting paved. There's always constant improvement that's happening because this island is the bread and butter of the entire country. So we're just seeing a ton of money being invested into this island. A ton of people start to discover it, and it's been exciting to see.
Rachel, I got a couple questions for you. It sounds like on this show, we've mostly spoken about long-term buy and hold rental property investors in mid-level markets where you have a working class tenant.
Yep.
And from what you're describing, it sounds like your investors are some folks that, number one, just want to buy and move down there, which I don't blame them. Another, and then there's the folks that want to hold on to it and rent it out. But it sounds like you are renting it out to travelers, right? Like, are your investors renting out to travelers, or are your investors renting out to people that are buying, that are staying in those residences?
Both. So, something that we discovered as a company a long time ago is many people who are buying these properties are not physically living here, right? They're not physically living here. They don't want to have to deal with finding renters. They don't want to have to deal with making sure Mary the maid is coming and cleaning up after each stay. So we have turnkey options within the communities that we have. And within the turnkey rental programs, we offer different sort of rental programs depending on what somebody is looking for. So, and what I mean by that is we have the nightly rental program. So that's geared towards people who are coming on vacation. They're here for a week, 2 weeks, want to experience Belize, Ambergris Caye. There's that vacation rental program. Then there's also the long-term rental program. So here in Belize, long-term is defined as 3 months or more. So the 3 months or more caters to the people who are coming down. Maybe they're exploring the country. They want to see if this is the place that they want to invest, or this is the place they want to live or spend significant periods of time. People who are participating in the investor program, so the nightly rental program, those tend to be the people whose primary goal is cash flow. Because at the end of the day, they're getting average daily rates of $150 a night. Let's say they're at 60% occupancy. They're going to be making a lot more per month or annually than somebody who's renting out their condo for $800 a month, right? And that just makes sense. But people choose the investor rental program. Yes, they want the cash flow. There's more risk associated with it if there are no renters, for example. But there's a little bit more risk in it. They also want a little bit more flexibility of coming down and using their home or their condo as they choose for vacation purposes. Then there are the people who are looking at it from the long-term rental perspective. And these are the people who, yes, of course, cash flow is important to them. They want to cover their expenses. They want to make a little bit of money too, but they're not necessarily looking for the double-digit pie in the sky numbers. They are, they're getting 3, 4, 5% net after expenses are paid. And they know there's somebody in there who's taking care of their condo, less wear and tear generally on the furniture, but they like knowing that there's somebody there who's consistent, and they like the guarantee of knowing they're going to have their rent come in for X months per year. So it's different. We see that there's a good mix of both. Some people are looking at it from that vacation rental perspective. They want highest cash flow. Of course, we all want highest return on investment. Actually, I rented my condo out. I have mine in the long-term rental market. I'm not getting as much, but all my expenses are being paid. I'm making a little bit of extra, and the home I know is being well taken care of. And I didn't necessarily want that risk of vacation renters coming in and just having more wear and tear in it. But at the end of the day, you're seeing typically on the island, I would say anywhere between 7 to 9, 10% net for vacation rentals is about average as to what you can expect when you're looking at an investment property.
That's a really good clarification. How does, and Sergio brings this up in the Q&A, how do currencies play a role in this stuff, right? Like you're a US investor, how do currency fluctuations play a role? How do you kind of like cash that stuff out? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. In Belize, we're lucky because in the sense that the Belize dollar is pegged to the US dollar, all transactions that happen between foreigners are actually done in US dollar. And then from our perspective, we give our owners the choice of if they want to get Belizean dollar or if they want to get US dollar payouts. I can't speak to all developers. I don't know if they all do that, but in our case, we do. For the other countries that we work in, like Nicaragua, for example, they use the Cordova there. And last I checked, there's about 30 Cordova to $1 US dollar. but all the transactions are still happening in US dollars. And then we give the choice to our owners if they want US dollars or if they want Cordobas when it comes to rental income. We have local owners there too. We have Nicaraguans who own within the Grand Pacifica property, and some of them would rather have the local currency paid out to them after they're renting out their home or their condo. So we give them the choice there. And then in Panama, they use the US dollar. Actually, they call it the Balboa, but they use the US dollar. El Salvador, they use the dollar and also Bitcoin. Now, since that became legal tender as of September 7th, I talk about volatility. I mean, that's volatile, but they're really adopting this community and country where they accept it. So it's been pretty neat to see. But at the end of the day, people are worried about getting paid out in local currency versus US dollars. We've helped to mitigate that risk.
If someone isn't using like ECI and, maybe they don't have somebody that's just handling it for them, is there something to like keep in mind as far as that currency piece of it? Do people see themselves like winning or losing kind of like based on what's going on, especially now that we're going into like inflationary times in the US? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say it depends entirely on if you're renting it within a development. If you're renting it, you have a single family home and you're renting it. Some people are using platforms like Airbnb or VRBO if they have a single family. So then that way there's a little bit more flexibility. They're able to get their income in US dollars. If you have a local bank account, and I know owners who have done the same thing where they'll get a local bank account, they'll have all the currency or all the income sent to their US bank account or to their local bank account rather. And then they just see that as a means for them to be paying their bills, to be paying expenses, to have money when they're down there visiting. So, if your real concern is making sure that you are getting your money out or getting your money in US dollars or avoiding that currency risk of being in another country, then what I would recommend doing is wiring it out to your US dollar account or wherever you want it to go on a fairly regular basis so that you don't have as much money in the bank account that's just fluctuating.
That makes sense. All right. So let's talk about, so Lee's got a good question here. How is the cost of living down there from an investor thinking, due to everything being shipped in would be expensive, right? Like that's how he's seeing it. Can you talk about kind of like cost of living and what is expensive versus what is not expensive? Because I don't think it's that simple, right?
Sure. So, I mean, it depends entirely on your quality of life, but I can tell you that if you shop locally, you're able to live well beyond what you would be living on in the US or your home country. I know we have some Germans here and people from all around, so I apologize if I keep going back to the US, but from your home country. Now, here you learn, so we are on an island. So not only is a lot of stuff imported into Belize, but it's also imported out to the island. And so what we found, or exported to the island. So what we found is that, yes, costs of imported goods do tend to be more expensive. I'll give you an example. So Doritos chips, you can get them for $15 Belize, which is $7.50 US, or you can buy the local brand for $2 Belize, which is $1 US. And so you just tend to do and buy things locally here. The tropical fruits, for example, we get 5 bananas. 5 bananas is on the island for $1 Belize dollar, so 50 cents, organic, fresh. I mean, just delicious. We don't have a lot of the fruits all year round because it's all seasonal, right? So you tend to get used to that too, but you realize at the end of the day, it's a much healthier lifestyle. You're not eating fruits that have been picked prematurely and sitting and getting all this fertilizer on them. It's just a lot healthier here. So generally though, I do see that things like gas, for example. So gas just went up to about $13 Belize a gallon. So that's $7 or $6 rather and 50 cents a gallon. And I know some people in California are like, yeah, that's about normal. But for many other people, that's not necessarily normal. I'm sure in Germany, it's pretty high too, but that does tend to be more expensive. But just the general day-to-day, the general quality of life does tend to be a lot less. Like you want to go out for a nice steak dinner here and have a couple glasses of wine, you can do that for about $45, $50 US. Or I know I've tried to do that in the States, it's $80, $90 US. So you're able to just see comparisons there. But overall, I'd say it's a lot more affordable to live here than it is in many developed countries.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think I understand this because I'm from outside the US that grew up inside the US, right? But it's like the simple things that you have access to in these Latin American countries, right? Like the meals and the quality of life of being able to be in just this like beautiful beach without people around, and even have, so labor is less expensive for you as well, right? Like I'm sure that you have people that work in your house, maybe cook you some meals and things and that's all like really, really affordable. But if you want to buy like a Polo brand shirt, it's going to cost like 3x.
It's true. It's true. And I do actually want to touch upon that labor point for a second, because I think sometimes when people are coming down to this part of the world from developed countries and they're like, all right, well, real estate is going to be really, really inexpensive there. I'm going to be able to get this beachfront bungalow for $60,000. And you may be able to get the beachfront bungalow for $60,000, but it may not necessarily be to the same standards that you're used to. There's probably not AC. There's probably not going to be hot water. You may be in a hurricane zone and it's built out of wood. So you guarantee you're not getting insurance on that. And if too heavy of a storm surge comes, that house will be gone. But I think we just also need to go in with the understanding that property and homes and real estate that's built to the same standards and quality that you want, that you should want, is going to be not necessarily the same, but price wise to build it is going to be about the same. Where we save money in this part of the world is on land costs, because beachfront land is substantially lower here than it is, and I say here, just Central America generally on the coast, compared to California, compared to Costa Rica, right? Even throwing that in because it's a lot more developed. And the other spot where we're saving money is, just like you said, labor. And so, labor here is substantially lower. I think, I know minimum wage is about $2 US an hour here in Belize. That's just for a very general run-of-the-mill job. For construction and contracting, it's a little bit more than that. But that's very, very different from $30, $40 an hour that you're paying in States or wherever. So that's where you'll find the savings. So that's when you're looking at real estate and you see prices are lower. Concrete costs what concrete costs, cement costs whatever. These things cost what they cost. Cinder blocks cost what they cost. But that's where you're going to save, is on the land price and then also the labor costs.
I want to add one more question here from the Q&A, and GC, then I want to turn it over to you to the investment scorecard.
Gotcha.
How does this stuff compare? Bill Shields is asking about how does it compare to Puerto Rico and the Rincon area, right? Like you hear a lot about the Caribbean and Puerto Rico being US, so it's got some protections, but it's also, like in the Caribbean, and it's got a little bit of the same downsides too. Are you familiar with how this compares to Puerto Rico?
I haven't been to Rincon specifically, but I have had other investors who are investors in ECI who are either invested in Puerto Rico or moved there. I know that they had, with I think it was Act 22 or Chapter 22, they had a lot of advantages for people to go down and start businesses. I think they're pretty friendly when it comes to crypto investors too. So I know a lot of people who've been moving down there to Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico is great because it technically is a US territory, but I had a lot of people not want Puerto Rico because it's a US territory. They're looking at places outside of the US. If the US is completely affected, they want something that's going to be independent from that. Rincon, I've seen pictures, I haven't been there, but it looks beautiful. And Puerto Rico has a nice geography, nice location, really beautiful beaches there. So I would certainly recommend that you continue looking at Puerto Rico if that's a place that is of interest to you.
Cool. GC, you want to do we want to roll into this? But by the way, I thank you for everything that you've shared. Like, this has been so illuminating for me thus far, because I've looked at all, right, as a Latin American, like the option of living down there is very, very real. Except I'm Venezuelan, so living in Venezuela is dangerous in the entire country. So I love this overview and kind of the nuances of all this stuff. I think it's been amazing. GC, you wanna compare it to?
Yeah, and Rachel, of course, I'm echoing Pablo's statements. This has been awesome, Rachel. I really have no clue about investing international. I know a lot of our folks in the audience don't as well. So it's been really illuminating. And one of the things we always love to do, especially as we have experts from different asset classes, this is a little bit different than what we do for rental properties in Jacksonville, is I would love to kind of end the show kind of speak in the same language. And so what we've identified is 6 investing criteria that most investors want. When you go into an investment, this is kind of what you want. And I would love to get your insight on kind of how this stacks up. We go on a 1 to 5 scale. So 5 would be most advantageous, would be the best. 1 would be kind of the worst, right? And I'll ask you about these criteria, okay? So First, we've got cash flow. Next, we've got volatility. Next, we've got upside. Next, we've got liquidity. Then we've got entry point. And then we've got effort overall. All right. So I know I haven't really prepped you for any of this. So thanks for not being scared and running through this with me. Let's talk a little bit about.
Fine. I'm just, if you see me, my eyes over here, I'm writing it down. I wrote down cash flow, I'm writing them down as you were saying them. So Yes, and obviously we're talking very generally. I think maybe for this specific exercise, we'll focus in on Belize and maybe
Yeah,
just
I think that'd be
Ambergris
great.
Key a little bit more. Otherwise, I'm going to tell you, yeah, 1 to 5, 1 to 5 for,
That's
because the region is just so generally split. But I'm going to focus on Ambergris Key. And if anybody has any interest outside of Ambergris Key, feel free to reach out and we can certainly go through that independently.
That'd be awesome. All right. So 1 to 5 scale, right? Let's talk about cash flow, right? So where I'm kind of thinking about this, most investments out there do not produce positive cash flow. And if we even think about investing in real estate, it's this new phenomenon that people are like, oh, I got to have positive cash flow. It wasn't always that way. And people invested very successfully for decades and decades. So the fact of having positive cash flow is a real plus. I would put, JWB earns, call it $100 a month in cash flow. And as far as the percentages that you were sharing out there before, I think you mentioned kind of like 3 to 5% for your long term. And that I would assume that's cash on cash return, right?
Correct.
And so 7 to 9% for vacation rentals, JWB, if you're just looking at cash on cash return, you're going to be kind of 2%, 3%. So for you, I'm thinking positive cash flow is huge. And even if you're getting into vacation rentals, I think you said 7 to 9% cash on cash return. Cash flow seems really strong. Am I reading that the right way?
You are. And, a lot of it also depends where you're buying. Some places have better marketing than others. And this is a conversation that I have when people are just starting to look at properties overseas and their primary goal is an investment. They want to see money. They want to see the cash flow. So in that case, I say go with a branded hotel. Go with a branded hotel. The advantage that they have that these other mom and pop places don't have is the fact that their job is to put heads on beds. Their only job is to provide rentals and to be putting people in the hotel rooms. And so I think that's where people will see more cash flow. I would say generally Ambergris Key is about a 3. I think that it has a lot of potential to increase because the country is still fairly young. I mean, 1971 is when they got their 81 is when they gained their independence. 1981 is when they gained their independence. So it's still a fairly young country. And, like we were saying before, you were still learning where Belize is. And I think as more people, more mainstream travelers learn about the country, we'll start to see cash flow increase. And that's why having branded hotels like a Best Western, like a Marriott, like the other ones that are here, Wyndham, Hilton, they help the mainstream travelers learn about the country and learn about the opportunity. So I think there's still room to improve there. I also want to make a mention that, it will also depend on if you're financing or if you're paying cash. Right. And if you're financing and you have an interest rate of 10, 11, 12%, then, maybe you're covering the mortgage and making a little bit of extra, or maybe you're really just covering expenses or having to put a couple dollars in. So it just really depends ultimately on those sort of factors, is who's the rental management company, again, going back to the diligence, how long have they been in business, but ultimately, what does their occupancy numbers look like?
You bring up a really good point about taking into account the financing. I guess I was kind of assuming that was taking into account the financing, but I forgot that it's 10 to 12% interest rates.
It's high. I mean, it's
So,
high. And I can speak more specifically for our properties. We're able to get lower interest rates. Ours about 4.9. But
I see.
generally, if you're not getting those sort of rates, you're getting this typical 10%, then it's going to be a bit of a different story. And I know we're so trained, and Keith and I talk about this all the time, is that we're so trained when we're looking at investment properties to leverage, put down as little as you can, keep moving on to the next investment, the next investment, the next investment. But sometimes in cases, it makes more sense actually to put more money down and not be financing all of it, or be financing smaller amount than you would have normally been doing previously.
Yeah. I wouldn't be so much of an advocate of the debt in a different country as I am in Jacksonville and in the States, because it's not the same, right? You don't have, cheap debt in other parts of the country. All right. So just so I'm clear on that though, so you can get positive cash flow on, let's just say, your properties in Belize because you guys have special financing available for folks, whereas it's probably not possible for others investing in Belize if you just have normal financing. Am I understanding that right?
I would say that's a fair assumption, but of course it depends on properties and all the other in between.
Cool. All right. Let's talk volatility. So, rental properties in the States in Jacksonville have performed incredibly well all through COVID, really. I mean, we're investing in a critical need for the individual, and then the government has a huge incentive to create stimulus to make sure that people can stay in their houses. And that's one reason why, we had such high retention rates here at JWB and in this space. How is volatility in terms of cash flows for you guys, especially over the last couple of years?
So, we've seen more volatility over COVID, obviously. Because we weren't getting vacationers down here. The borders were closed in multiple countries, or it was just hard to get there. So it wasn't as easy we're getting zero occupancy, right? Zero occupancy. I don't think that's a surprise though for many people who are in the vacation rental space. Where we actually saw people getting cash flow was the people who had long-term renters, right? There are people who were expats living down there and they said, we're not going back. We don't have a home in the States, or we don't have a home in our home country. So it was interesting to see, because typically, like we said, people who are on the long-term rental are making less, but this time they're actually making more than people who are in the vacation rental. But I would say it's stable. I'd say it's about a 3.5. I'd say stable is probably the best word for it at this point. And again, room to grow there because of the fact that we are getting more and more people coming down, more direct flights coming into the country. But that would be my best number for you there.
Yeah, perfect. And it's good to know that, listen, there's that risk if the borders are shut and we go through COVID again, that that's going to affect your vacation rentals. I mean, I think that's clear. Let's take that out of the equation. What's typical volatility like pre-COVID if you're looking in this market?
Sure. So I would say, historically, as we've looked at Central America, numbers have just continued to be going up year after year. We have more people who are traveling. Younger generation is more excited to be hopping on a plane and going somewhere. And now where we have digital nomads, we were able to work from anywhere, right? We have these increasing numbers of people who are coming down and spending time in the region because they're still able to get their job done. They don't have to wait until retirement. They don't have to wait until they have a week break from work. So we do tend to see it increasing generally per year in many of these locations. What I would recommend and what I would want people to consider too is that a little bit more specifically is these countries have high seasons and they have low seasons. So that's where you'll see more volatility versus annual volatility. High season is, and I'm gonna speak for Ambergris Caye specifically, high season is middle of November through middle of May. It's when it's chilly up in the north, people are coming down, they wanna spend Christmas time on the beach, or they have spring break and they're bringing their kids somewhere. So we do tend to see that's high season. Low season is the opposite, middle of October through middle of November. And so there, what I would say is September, October, part of November, maybe a little bit of August, September, October, a little bit of November, it's quiet. It's quiet here. So when you're thinking about your rental income that's going to be coming in from vacation rentals, expect to have very low numbers during those 3 months. Where you're going to see more rental income is during that high season period, peak season, that's the holidays. If you really are thinking about cash flow, please do not come and stay in your condo, your home over peak season. That's when you're making a bulk of your income. Truly, that's when you're making a bulk of your income. And I know we all want the best of both worlds. We want to have a beautiful condo on the beach. We want to be able to take our family down there over the holidays. But I can tell you, if you're really looking at this from the cash flow perspective, you want to keep that open for renters because you will get that. So I'd say that's more of where you see the volatility. But just historically, we've seen the numbers. We look at Belize Tourism Board. They are the local tourism board. They produce numbers every year. So you're able to see the number of travelers who are coming in, where they're coming in from, and then also where in the country they're going to. And Ambergris Caye continues to top the charts when it comes to most popular locations for people to visit in the country.
Gotcha. So it seems like overall volatility there is maybe more than what we would see in a long-term rental in the States. However, you can make the case that just being diversified out of the United States kind of increases or decreases your overall volatility, right? Get into a different asset class in a different country, and you're helping yourself kind of smooth out your returns that way. Talk a little bit about upside and liquidity. All right. So it was great to hear you said, generally about 5% appreciation year over year. So that's a little bit higher than what we see in the Jacksonville market. It seems like the lack of financing though will kind of hedge that a little bit, right? If you can only put 20% down or 25% down, your upside is higher. And then I was thinking from liquidity, it was for the Belize market, I think you said, about 130 to about 200,000 to 400,000. So if you're putting 50% down, that's about 65 to maybe 200 out of pocket to be able to purchase a property.
Correct.
Am I in the right ballpark there?
Yep. Exactly right. Exactly right.
Very cool. And then let's talk about effort. So this was the question I wanted to ask earlier. The biggest thing for me, if I'm thinking about making a decision like this, is how can this be passive? How can this be effortless? And especially working with the best team out there in a different part of the different part of the world is just super important. So how do you guys make this easy for investors? How easy can it really be? Or should people know that this is just a little bit more of an active investment?
No, people don't have to do anything. And then in fact, we tell people that not to do anything if they don't want to. If they want to send renters over, they'll get a split of the average daily rate. They'll get a little bit of extra money for being the referral agent, but otherwise they really don't have to do anything. And that was really some of the big reasons why we decided to partner with a hotel brand. With Marriott specifically, they they require us to use either Marriott or a third-party operator who takes care of everything. So, we're developing it, we're building it. We have a Marriott name on the building, but at the end of the day, it's Highgate who's there. They manage dozens of branded hotels throughout the Caribbean. They were approved by the Marriott. And so they probably don't even want you to get involved. They want owners to stay away. They want to make it as easy and streamlined as possible so that they're able to give people the Marriott experience. And it's the same with Best Western. And so I'd say from those perspectives, you really have an incredible ease of not having to do anything. For our other properties, we have some tiny homes over the water. I saw someone on here mention that their children own with us there, which is pretty neat to see. But for those homes that are over the water, that is going to be operated by ECI. We have 25 years of experience in doing this. So we have the reservation system, we have the on-site management company, and I really discourage people from trying to set up Airbnb. I know I've gotten that question quite a bit. If you're not planning to live in the country, it is very, very tricky to set up an Airbnb. And the reason that I said is, yes, you may get somebody in through the online reservation system who's staying, but then that means your guest is going to be getting into the home or trying to get into your home without you there. Also, you may have thought that you found somebody trusty who will be there to clean the house before somebody comes. And we have boat days here quite a bit on the island. And I can tell you, when there's a boat day, whoever's invited is going. So you have your housekeeper who's supposed to come and clean, but she gets invited on a free boat trip. She's going to go on that boat trip instead. And so it just gives you the peace of mind of knowing that it's taken care of and there's consistency across the board. And I think for investors, that's probably one of the most important things to know, is that your guests will have a great experience. And you don't have to do anything. You really don't have to do anything. Come down and visit every now and again, but let the rental management and the property management team take care of it for you.
Sounds fantastic to me. All right, Pablo, she made it through with flying colors. Thank you, Rachel.
Dude, we did it. Do you see that? So the chat is lighting up about how much they love this scorecard, right? This has been one of your best executions ever. Rachel, that was an amazing, amazing comparison. I know that you have a resource for our friends here. So Joanna, if you can share that now in the chat, I'm going to read it out in case you are listening on the podcast. If you go to info.ecidevelopment.com/NYAIS, tell them what they get, Rachel.
Oh, this is probably one of my favorite guides that we give out, but it's a resource guide called the Consumer Resource Guide or the Global Property Resource Kit. And it's geared towards people who are starting to look at property for the first time overseas. Even if you have property overseas, it has great questions to ask in there. My favorite part of that guide is the 15 must-ask questions when looking at property overseas. We started to go through some of them earlier, but one of them that I didn't mention that I do like to highlight is it plumbed for hot water? I mean, I had that mistake when I first moved to Nicaragua, was living in this beautiful development, and I didn't have hot water. So, those are the sort of questions, especially if you as the owner are going to own it, you want to make sure that it is going to have that hot water there for you. So I would highly recommend everybody request it. It's educational. It was put together by our CEO, who's also the co-founder of the organization. He's from the States originally, came down to Belize in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And has been working with us since. He actually also helped to start a bank. Here is actually a mortgage company, initially turned into a bank, set up a trust company. So we're well grounded here in the region, but I would highly recommend that resource guide, guys. Just download it. And from there, reach out if you have any specific questions. I see a lot of movement over here in the chat, and I want to make sure we're able to get to you all individually as well.
Always a lot of movement in the chat. The chat is one part chat about the show, one part social club. So don't fret. People are hanging out, having a good time. Rachel, what is you shared your email not that long ago. Can you just kind of mention that again in case people want to get in contact with you?
Sure, you can reach out to me directly, rjensen, JENSEN, rjensen at ECI Development, and ECI Development, DEVELOPMENT. rjensen at ecidevelopment.com. Let me know that you listened to us through the show here, Not Your Average Investor Show. I want to make sure that you get that complimentary resource kit that is mentioned there, and also just be able to answer your questions. So if they say the scorecard, if you're saying, oh, the scorecard, I'm like, what show did we talk about the scorecard on? I'm able to say, oh, yes, it's Not Your Average Investor Show. So I'd love to hear from everybody.
Phenomenal. And I also want to encourage you all on Thursday. We got the JWB Rental Liquor Property of the Week. Ooh, that was tougher for me to pull off. And we got a guest investor today, Mohan Patheri, who's going to be joining us on Thursday as well. where we go over the blocking and tackling of rental income properties in Jacksonville in JWB's inventory. Because as we like to say, if you want to find out about rental income properties, if you want to find out about property management for property investors, or if you want to get an edge on the Jacksonville market, you're in the right place. Thursday will be all about that. But if you really want some personalized help, go to chatwithjwb.com and book a call with our team of experts. I want to thank our community who spends an hour with us here on the middle of a day on a Tuesday. The fact that we had 40 plus people, Rachel, that's a testament to you, because the numbers kept going up and up as the call went on, which means that people were like on Facebook are like, no, I want to get in on this show. So the fact that you show up here for this value, Rachel, that you provided, we never take that for granted. We really, really, really appreciate that. And GC, I'm gonna kick it over to you to send us off here, man.
All right. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for being here. It's just been great getting to know you over the past couple of months, getting introduced to you through Keith, and, just being that expert that we've been searching for. In fact, our community actually asked for this show. Jen Phillips emailed us and said, hey, I'd really love to find out more about this. So, just thank you for being here, and we hope to have you back in the future.
Of course. Well, thank you so much. I know there's still so much more that we could talk about. So I'm looking forward to a part 2 at some point in the future. And in the meantime, guys, we look forward to hearing from you. Even better, just hop on a plane, come down to Belize, come visit, do your due diligence, make it a business trip, and we'll see you down here soon. Thank you so much, Pablo and Greg. Really appreciate it.
I think that was mentioned in the chat.
Everyone's coming
Not Your Average
down.
Investor Show meetup happening. So I don't think that's too far-fetched here.
I think we're going to have to do an IRL Belize meetup.
There we go.
Love it.
We'll do that, because you know what? We are not average investors, so we're not going to take an average meetup. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out a call sign here. Rachel, never mind. I'll see you all on Thursday. Thank you for everything.